Hi guys, I am here with a true story for you. I haven't done one in a while. This is from our book, When God Winks at You, How God Speaks Directly to You Through the Power of Coincidence. It's one of our new guidepost books that I bought for us. Those extraordinary little events in your life happen for a reason. I love these books. All right, this one is a little bit longer. This one, The Little Book That Could. Though it may seem to be, this story is not really about me. It's about the series of When God Winks books and the unbelievable God winks that lifted them from obscurity to land on Oprah Winfrey's bedroom nightstand. But I must fully confess, right here and now, that because I have been led to every story in them, each book has been co-authored by God and me. He is the author. I just wrote down the stories he gave me. It all began at the little church on Quaker Hill in upstate New York, where I was invited to speak. What a coincidence that I ended up at this church, well off the beaten path. It turned out to be across the road from the country home of my hero, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, the prominent author of The Power of Positive Thinking. Several months in advance of my talk, I chose the topic that had always fascinated me: coincidence. Is it evidence of a grand plan? Then just days before my talk, Dr. Peale died on Christmas Eve and was buried behind the little church, causing me to alter my opening remarks. The President of the United States said something this week that resonated with each of us. He said, "What a coincidence that Dr. Peale, who gave his life to the celebration of Christ, should be called to God's side on the very eve that would celebrate the birth of Christ." Coincidence? I wonder. Well, that started it. Sharing incredible coincidence stories that I encountered over the years connected me with my audience like never before. I was looking into faces of adults who appeared like children listening to a bedtime story. My audience was engaging me with smiles, nods, and wide-eyed wonder. I knew then and there that I had come upon a topic that touched people. Somehow I struck a nerve with the question, is it possible that coincidence has something to do with God and his grand plan for you? I determined from that experience to write a book. I soon began to learn the cold, hard lessons of becoming an author. If you've ever thought about writing a book, this might be helpful information. It's a long process, finding and developing the discipline to write daily, 5 to 7 every morning before my day job took me 4 years to figure out. Fretting over the book's voice, the style, took author 2 years. Finding a literary agent who believed in it and me was in the 7th year. Getting a publisher to gamble on an unknown author, even though I once ran Good Morning America, which clearly impressed me much more than it did them, was a lesson in rejection in its 8th year. I had 30 turndowns before a small Northwest publisher, Beyond Words Publishing, took a chance on me and released my first When God Winks book. Then there was another awakening. I naively learned that after years of writing, a finished manuscript was only the beginning. My publisher's job is to get the book into the store. Counseled one veteran author speaker, my job is to get it out. In that clear, cold assessment, I realized that no matter how excited you think your publisher is about your baby and its multi-year gestation period, it's just one more book on the company's plate. At Barnes & Noble, where seemingly 1 million books reside, You're just one more slice of bologna on its shelf. How does one little book scramble to the top of get attention over all the rest? Publicity, of course. And one soon concludes that there is an unspoken expectation that you, the author, will be generating most of that publicity. The publisher may give you some help, a 3-month window with a PR person, but then you're generally expected to be on your own. You need to hire your own PR representative and or make relentless calls to the media. It is now understandable to me why famous people who are not good writers are more readily published than good writers who are not famous. Having access to TV and radio talk shows and the fortitude to keep plugging away is simply what is expected of you. In addition, of course, to having the manuscript that you've sweated and slaved over. All right enough whining about that. Let's get to the big question. How does one get booked on the Oprah Winfrey Show? During the first 2 years that When God Winks was on the bookshelves published by Beyond Words in Portland, I hired 4 different PR people to make pitches to the Oprah Show producers. Now remember, Oprah, she's a God-fearing person. She loves the Lord. I know this. What a thrill it was the day one of the Oprah producers called back and said the most enchanting words any author can hear. I love your book. Oprah will love your book. My heart soared. 1 week later was the tragedy of 9/11. All shows for the entire season, Oprah and every other talk show were revamped to deal with the nation in mourning, and no one in the mainstream media could envision the merit of a segment about the inspirational stories in my little book. I did receive support from the 700 Club. That's if you know what that is, that's a religious, Christian show, on the ABC Family Channel, and a considerable number of radio programs, but national television turned a deaf ear. People who worked with me then I ran Good Morning America were now employed by virtually every major talk show, yet the answer to my PR people was pretty much the same. Tell Esquire we love him. We hate the title of his book. Yes, that 3-letter word, God, was the impediment for many bookers. Ironically, the title was the reason so many people said they were drawn to the book in the first place. Then a major God wink occurred. I was scheduled to appear on the Hour of Power at the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California on Mother's Day, 2003. I told my publisher that this powerful TV ministry was viewed in more than 150 million homes every Sunday morning. You better get a lot more books in the pipeline, I counseled my publisher. Richard Kahn, ever certain that my publisher's maintenance of supply was falling short of my whipping up demand. I think we can afford to put 5,000 books in the system, said Richard, consulting his checkbook. What? That's enough, I complained. That's when I realized the downside to a small publisher. While I was elated with Beyond Words' creativity, design, and editorial sense, Under-Editor-in-Chief Cindy Black and I loved the friendly accessibility to Richard. The ability of most publishing companies to quickly put large numbers of books into the pipeline is dedicated by the vagaries of their cash flow. To 9/11, through no fault of their own, many of Beyond Words vendors were considerably late in their payments. My publisher was struggling to find sufficient capital with those to operate. Looking skyward, I prayerfully complained, "What am I going to do, Lord? I finally get international TV exposure and there aren't going to be enough books in the stores." My hopes were crashing. But my wonderful wife, Louise, had an idea. "We can't let this opportunity pass," she said. "Let's put $20,000 worth of books on our credit card." Gulp. That was my gulp. The second gulp came from my publisher. But then the Hour of Power went on the air, and When God Winks shot to the number 21 on Amazon.com, there were indeed enough books in the store. What we didn't know was that our faith in the book was opening the way for another extraordinary God wink to unfold a few weeks later. Judith Kerr, the president of a new Simon & Schuster imprint, Atir Books, was making the annual pilgrimage, like most publishers, to Ann Arbor, Michigan headquarters of Borders and Walden Books. At the conclusions of Judith's presentation of the new fall catalog, a young woman named Marcella Clashman came up to her and said perfect words to a publisher's ear. "The book you really ought to get is When God Winks. We can't keep it on the shelf." Marcella had been monitoring increased book sales every time there was media attention, particularly after the Hour of Power broadcast. "What's it about?" asked Judith. "The power of coincidence in our lives," revealed Marcella. Judith was very attentive. Marcella had no way of knowing that years before in Australia, Judith Kerr became a star in publishing circles by launching an unknown book called The Celestial Prophecy, all about coincidence. Marcella's perfect words striking the perfect ears was an incredible God wink. That was on a Friday. The following Monday, an offer was placed on the table to license from Beyond Words the right to publish an Artria Books Simon & Schuster edition of When God Winks. There was never again a question of having enough books in the store. Oprah continued to be in our prayers. An appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show was what the book needed to get it into the national consciences. When we think of it, Oprah's name probably shows up in more daily prayers than anyone else in the country. Mostly authors' prayers. By 2004, I felt I had made some real progress. I was told that a specific producer had been assigned to When God Winks. Oh, finally there was someone my PR people could bug. But on the morning of May 9th, 2004, I saw myself like a little kid trudging to the end of the line, like my baseball hat in my hand. Oprah was winding down for the season. In just 3 weeks, it would go into summer hiatus. I knew in my heart that I would have to wait until the show started up again in September. Again, my hopes plummeted. I didn't think we were going to make it this year. I grumbled to my wife, Louise, as we finished our morning prayer time. Brightly, she looked at me and said with authority, "If God wants you on the show, he'll find a way." Because I tend to believe everything my wonderful wife says, I nodded, accepted, and perhaps for the first time, let go and let God. Then, 3 days later, we were driving through Virginia Beach, Virginia, where Louise travels 1 week a month to tape her talk show, Living the Life, ABC Family Channel. My cell phone rang. It was a woman's voice, a friend, breathless with excitement. "Oprah just held up your book," she said quickly. My eyes squinted slowly. I shook my head and looked at the phone as I said goodbye. "She obviously mistaken," I said to Louise. "Probably has it confused with someone else's book." Then 3 more calls, including Richard Kuhn, my first publisher, the same message. We were astounded. Here's what happened. Oprah was giving her TV audience a tour of her Chicago home. Entering a bedroom, she mentioned that rather than having a TV in that room, she liked to keep favorite books by the bed. She reached down and picked up the top one. "I have a book called When God Winks. I love that cute little stories about how there are no coincidences in our lives. Oprah set the book down and went on with her tour, but on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble, there was a flurry of activity. The book shot into the top 10 in a matter of hours. A few weeks later, Louise and I were at home to see the rerun of our show, sitting right where I had let go and let God. As we sat before the TV, eagerly anticipating that Oprah was going to pick up my little book and that it was again going to zoom into the top 10, the bigger question, that one that really fascinated us, was how did God get my book into Oprah's bedroom just 3 days after our prayer? Unquestionably, the taping of Oprah's visit to her home occurred many days or weeks before Louise and I uttered our prayer. One can only conclude that from God's perspective, it's just part of his much larger yet simple plan. God's simple plan to provide hope and reassurance. Think about it. Where would my little God wink book be today without all those God winks? The ironic connection between original pulpit talk at a little country church and Dr. Pill's death on Christmas Eve. The perfect words spoken by a young book buyer to the perfect ears, and the incredible God wink of the book ending up in Oprah's bedroom just 3 days after we had let go and let God. They are all downright baffling. I have good plans for you, not plans to hurt you. I will give you hope and a good future. Jeremiah 29:11. So many times in life we look plaintively skyward, uttering frustration or a complaint. We think we aren't being heard, but we are. Our complaint is a prayer that God hears and truly understands. He just may have a plan to answer it differently than we expect. My plan was to be a guest on the Oprah show. God's plan was different. An unsolicited endorsement for my book, Oprah saying, I love it. In my final analysis, I wasn't the only benefactor of God's blessing. Beyond Works, my publisher, who had faith in the God Winks concept and development, the original God Winks book, received blessings as well. Richard Kuhn and Cindy Black acquired the rights to the book called The Hidden Messages in Water by a Japanese researcher named Masuo Emoto, and watched the book hit the New York Times bestseller list. And to top it off, Judith Kerr, my publisher at Simon & Schuster, Acheria Books, who got to know Richard and Cindy through our experience, offered Beyond Works a deal to become a new imprint of S&S. God's overall plan for you and me is so much bigger than our small, simple minds can possibly comprehend. When we demonstrate our faith in Him, He provides us with hope and reassurance, revealing a portion of His plan for us. All journeys have secret destinations of which the traveler is unaware. Martin Buber, so true. Let's see, does this continue on or is that where it stops? Let's see here. It's hard to tell with these stories how it... I think that might... Yes, I think that's where this one ends, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed that story. Pretty sure that's where that one ends. So I hope you guys enjoyed that story there, and I thought that was a good one there. And you just see some things, God answers prayers, but sometimes it's just not the way that you think that it's going to happen. God answers them, but not always the way you want Him to. They thought that, hey, I'm praying that I want to get my book published. I want to go on the Oprah show to tell people about my book so they'll buy my book, but that didn't happen. But Oprah gave a house tour, and his book was in her house, and she's like, hey, this is one of the books I read, during the night. I love this book right here. And that book, like, sold a lot of copies. And that was their book. So, you know, that was God's plan all along. So, you know, God always has a plan. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Good night, guys.